You're tuned in to the MtG Cable cast, where they cover Magic, the Gathering Finance. All right? You don't know about it? You're tuned in right now and get ready to learn some shit. Buckle your seat belts and light a blunt and get ready for the MtG Cable cast. Starring Reptar and Thirsty, them onion head motherfuckers.
Hey everybody, well, welcome to episode 2 in our series, What We Would Do With or To WotC If We Ran Hasbro. So in part 1, we covered what we would do with the game itself, what we were looking for, and a little bit of organized play because it was pretty kind of cut and dry, yes or no, what we wanted to do. We just wax poetic and talk about the days of ELO and chess. Today, we're covering kind of the meat and potatoes. This is the org. This is WotC from top to bottom. What would we do with WotC if we ran Hasbro? What do you got?
All right, make WotC its own thing. Put them in charge of their own development. Great, let them run autonomously. They did it for 20 years before you came along and started mucking it up. They can do it for another 20 years and make a great product that is high quality, that is deliverable. Also, if you want to make digital media a thing, if you want digital platforms to play your game, I don't know, maybe hire people for that. Have a proper QA department. Have proper testers. Don't have one team literally take care of everything. It's impossible. If you worked in any organization, not just in software, and you're in charge of new projects, you're in charge of quality control, you're in charge of loss prevention, you're in charge of everything, it doesn't work. You're wearing too many hats. And I get it. Hasbro probably only employs, I think at one point, like right after Hasbro took over, WotC only employed like 850 people, which is mind-boggling. The rest was all like 1099 contractors. Fine, whatever. Hire more people. I get it. It's a business. It's bottom line oriented. Of course it is. And you're making money hand over fist. When your earnings were down 8%, WotC was up 24%. Great. Don't care. Let them run the game, because in my opinion, and maybe I'm wrong, the way they are running the game as this giant cash cow, yes, it's making it incredibly valuable, but it's creating a bubble that's not going to last forever. And if you want this game to continue long term, you've got to get better about letting them run the game. Stop running it like a toy company. Start running it like a game company, which is what it is. Granted, D&D is something separate entirely. That's its own entity. That's also part of Wizards of the Coast. I think they've been doing a great job with Dungeons & Dragons. I think getting all of the pop culture references and making it more mainstream has been good for the health of Wizards of the Coast. I think D&D doesn't need to be touched. It's that good right now. Magic, however, feels like it's floundering. And the more that they get involved with how Magic is run, the worse it's going to be for the company at large. Because long term, it's just not viable. We already have people complaining about wallet fatigue, about having trouble staying up to date with new sets, new releases. Your grinders who may only show up for a big event every 3 to 4 months don't really have an idea of what's going on with the game and have started jumping ship to other things. So you know what? Hands off. Let Wizards run its own stuff. And when it comes to your digital media, get separate teams in there that actually know what they're doing. Don't just put it all on one person. You know, Arena still has problems crashing. Snoop was creating problems in Moto forever. And there's still issues where I'm running into like infinite shuffle glitches on Arena. All you need to do is get someone in there to properly test it. And then you know what? Great. What we can do is now go into this game, test it, make sure it's a stable product on release. Do you think if months after the fact, WoW was experiencing glitches as common as has been with Arena and is with Moto decades after its release, WoW would still be around? No, because they have an actual QC team. They actually do what they're supposed to do. And I think that having that autonomy and getting those people in not only improves the overall finances of Hasbro long term, it improves the viability of Wizards of the Coast and Magic the Gathering specifically as an entity long term. It also lets you avoid issues like Magic Legends, which, if anybody paid attention, they literally shut down months after it released and said, hey guys, we're issuing refunds for everyone because this was a disaster. You can't afford that kind of product repeatedly. I don't care how much money you're making. If you stumble that poorly, if you put that many resources into developing something and it just dies, that's not a viable business model. And it's, they've done what they can with Arena, they've done what they can with Moto, but those are only 2 platforms. They haven't expanded the digital footprint. How many people remember playing Planescape Magic growing up? Or Microprose Magic? That game was awesome. I want more stuff like that. I don't necessarily want to just play the card game all day. I want a cool setting. I want awesome stuff that I can do in the universe. And expanding your digital team and getting the proper people in there helps with that. Additionally, some of the QC people I would bring in would be actual D&D people, because these are min-maxers who look at everything, look at ways that things can be broken, and test tabletop games which take hours longer for a single session than a game of Magic does. And bring in some Magic people for D&D to try to get some fresh perspective on D&D as well, to see ways that you can improve that product, because I think more eyes on each of those products, internally and externally, only improves things. Also, get rid of the rules committee. That's it.
Fair.
Maybe not get rid of them, just retool some of it. Like, why is Sway of the Stars banned? That card is bad. It's a 10-mana sorcery that doesn't win the game. It's garbage. It shouldn't be banned. That's my soapbox for the rules committee. Sorry, I'm done.
Cross organizational testing and visibility is always great, but they don't do that, and I'm gonna speak to some of that. Something I want to touch on up top. This is a conversation born out of late last week with the move of Chris Koch from WotC's COO to Hasbro CEO. One of the things I will look into as Hasbro is taking the now defunct Transformers CCG from a physical game to a digital-based game.
That game was awesome.
Because WotC has the experience doing that. I wouldn't put it all on WotC necessarily, despite the fact that judges signed up for Judge Academy could cert for Transformers. It's like, we work for them, but not whatever. And I think as Hasbro, I would hope that this run of the card game, despite running into supply chain issues and then overcorrecting causing my issue, was the last time I needed to learn that if I have a Transformers product and I cannot literally transform it, it is not a Transformers product and thus does not need to be fucking made.
Facts.
So you make it digital, and you know what your items can do, your game pieces, transform. They can just idly transform in digital format, and it just hits nostalgia the way you need to. All right, so that's up top. About WotC itself, there are too many old white dudes that are too comfortable with their titles and roles that should honestly have been dismissed over a decade ago. WotC needs new blood and an updated vision and understanding of its player base as well as technology. You can tell from their decisions, being these old fuddy-duddies surrounding products and everything digital, that those in power have views that are too old and out of date. A good example, attempting to clone Hearthstone was a good decision in 2013, not 2020. So, while we're talking about digital, whether these are the flagship products or not, WotC needs to decide if it is a dev shop. If they decide they are, then they need to bring on worthwhile talent with a history of current success and not entities with that aforementioned old white dudes have fond memories of. Neverwinter Nights is dead and gone, and EQ, while still seeing current development, is not a game that is drawing eyes. You don't need to hire these studios. There are a lot of talented, hungry individuals and studios that you could bring in or buy out. If WotC is not a dev shop, then they need to find one that they like, that doesn't just support games in quote-unquote maintenance mode that these old white farts enjoy, and find someone that has an earnest drive and desire to work with the product. with enough competitors in the space, it can't be that hard. You just can't continue to be so fucking cheap and timid. Your point about WoW is accurate. And here's the other thing. From like maybe the middle of what is known as vanilla WoW, so within the first 2 or 3 years, I can't count the number of games that were coming out that were the WoW slayers. So you know what Blizzard had to do? They had to iterate. They had to be ahead of them. They had to make a better game. Magic doesn't have to do that. It's Magic. Everything else is already terrible in comparison. Flesh and Blood looks pretty dope. It still has a long way to go here. Like,
Yeah.
it could get there if they keep stumbling and they keep falling and they just keep like it's like that Simpsons episode where Sideshow Bob just keeps stepping on the rakes. You step on enough of them, someone's gonna run by it, right?
Yeah.
And that's what's going to happen with the game and these digital products. Then, as far as understanding their players, this goes back to the issue about the game as a whole. We want playable cards. That's it. Cards that have been designed and tested by teams that share a vision and understanding about a product, that work harmoniously together and aren't rushed for results. Teams that are well funded and well staffed that can help craft a game that offers a rich experience and high replay value, not infinite secret layers and EDH decks each year. This is a point we touched on in the previous episode, and we'll talk about more coming up. And one last parting shot: there's no need to charge as much. There is no need to charge as much for quote-unquote Masters packs as they do. It's just gatekeeping people from playing Modern or more EDH. Why? Probably because it's easy, guaranteed money. But if you just price them like standard packs in the future, you can just sit back and enjoy the windfall.
Yeah. It's not like it costs anything extra to produce these sets. The cards themselves don't cost extra, and it's not like they're testing it at all, so it's obviously not tied into playtesting. No. Why are you charging more? I just don't understand. It does not make sense to me.
Nope. So we both touched on bigger teams that can focus on their job to do a better job. Like, these are independent notes, so this is obvious. Like,
yeah,
that your shit just isn't QA'd or designed or developed properly from a physical card or from a card standpoint. It's odd.
It should not be this difficult. I don't understand why it is.
No, and it's ridiculous that we keep having the same gaffes. I will always remember, and I could find the article. I just CBF2 right now. If you look at the band announcement for Skull Clamp, it is the most embarrassing thing you'll ever read from an organization on the whole.
It's so bad.
It's not just to talk about the iterations of Skull Clamp that they went through and how +1, -1 got through with the draw trigger on it. It's what they were playing internally at the time. That is the embarrassing part. They weren't playing it in Affinity, which was the brand new mechanic in the brand new set. They were playing it in their Wizards deck, which was the previous block and a tribe completely irrelevant to any aspect of the game. They were testing a brand new card in a brand new set with cards that were completely irrelevant.
Yep.
It's 52 cards in the average deck of cards. You get 2 jokers and 2 insert cards, right? So that brings you up to 56 and 4 skull clamps. That's effectively what they were doing. They sleeved up a deck of playing cards. They opened a bicycle deck of cards, sleeved it up, and then put 4 skull clamps in there. And of course they missed it. Deathrite Shaman is similar, but that was a last minute before printing error, which they seem to have really moved away from. They kind of... Yeah. There were some between Skull Clamp and DRS. We mentioned Jite's third ability, making it effectively the first Planeswalker, and the best 2-mana Planeswalker, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
Deathrite Shaman being the best 1-mana Planeswalker.
Yeah.
DRS got a tough... People didn't understand the toughness bump on DRS, on Deathrite Shaman, and WotC came out and said, that was us. We did this for the quote-unquote splash damage available from Innistrad block. What splash damage? Nobody was playing anything from that block that just dealt 1 damage to everything. There wasn't branching bolt or something like that floating around yet, or in that format that was playable. And so DRS just clobbered Modern and Legacy. Did nothing in Standard. Like, okay.
Great. Thanks, guys. Good job.
We move through time, then we go back to the artifact set, and that's always going to be a problem because they always... Look, this one's a give and take. And This one I'll always accept from the org. They tried something new. Vehicles was brand new.
Yeah.
Affinity was brand new. I'll give them that. And Mirrodin was supposed to be the foothold for the next standard to build on, right? So that was kind of freaking weird. And Kaladesh and Aether Revolt were going to be the last set in that standard and then rotate before they did that dumb thing where they changed rotational patterns, right? And they tried something. They tried two new things, energy and vehicles. And for the most part, they were okay, but they pushed them a little too far because they were brand new and they didn't really know where the line was yet, so they overstepped. Then they pulled back and they corrected. Not quite fast enough, but still good enough. Then we move through and then we have these weird kind of like fire design bands in Oko and literal a fire band and Fires of Invention and things like that, where they just went they went above and beyond, and that's more egregious. But I think that part, the 16 bands or whatever it was in that standard season,
you're banning commons, people. Come on.
That I think at that point, that smacks of an organization that does not have enough resources, does not have a cohesive vision between teams working on one side of the game. To your point, bringing in the D&D guys, people that are that have a different viewpoint, a different stance, probably know how to play the game, to just come in and rattle off some stuff. Take a look at these cards. What do you think? You don't even have to play test. Like, how often do you play? Get a feel for them, and then just throw them at the cards. What does it look like? They did that with Patrick Sullivan, and he laughed at some of this shit too. He's like, "That's ridiculous. You cannot do this." And
They seemingly, we lack resources, so we're going to rely on people's passion.
Yeah.
To work for this. And one of my biggest issues with the Future League, when they had it, was, okay, so you're expecting pros who play this game professionally to make a living to test this and be honest about busted ass shit that they're playing with, and not just tell their friends, hey, this is coming up. You expect me to believe that the Future League missed Aetherworks Marvel with Eldrazi? Get out of here. You need people whose sole job is to test this stuff. It's to make sure that this works and to give them the resources they need to succeed. Mm-hmm. And it just seems like they're just, why not?
And obviously, digital's still a problem. And pick a reason why it's a problem. But it is. There's probably no correct place to start to fix it. It is probably just you're all gone.
Yeah.
And then start from the ground up again to really fix it. Arena, not to say you need to scrap the projects, but you need to definitely bring in new teams.
Yes.
To work on that product. And you know what? When these games go into maintenance mode and basic lands don't break Arena, you can then take that Arena team and let them focus on new, interesting passion projects. I was trying to remember. It's not Duel the Planeswalkers. There's a 2002, 2003 game. We've talked about it before, where it was all 5 of the Pit Lords from Onslaught were selectable characters, and when you summoned your little Llanowar elf, it popped up on the screen, and when you attacked with it, it just walked across and then stabbed somebody else.
It was like battle chess.
Yeah, exactly. Not the greatest, but an alternative. And you can do stuff like that. You don't have to try and take the skin of another game and drape it over the skin of Magic, a la Legends. It's here's Diablo, but with Magic. You don't need that. You can turn them loose once your base products are stable or stable enough. And I'm sure we're going to bump up into this in Arena like we do in Moto. Not everything's going to work. We're in an era where, in theory, it should. But there are cards that will never be implemented on Moto because they just will not work. Or they're anti. And that's fine. Yeah, this is a game that's made for paper first and digital second. Who knows? Maybe digital first later on and then paper second. So everything should work.
Yeah.
But you need to make that decision about what you want to do. Either you build it, so you bring in brand new talent, brand new teams, brand new management, and then you get the fuck out of the way. Like you were talking about, give these teams the autonomy to do what they need to do. Or you go out and you commission a dev shop and you're like, this is what you're doing. We're buying you. And you, again, leave them the fuck alone and let their management do things. Yeah. I mentioned earlier, it's very obvious to see that a lot of this is an old viewpoint, an old standpoint. And while we haven't really gotten confirmation of that from some of the people that have left, we know via QA efforts and the way things are handled, how they're built, how they're tested, they're iterated, that it seems like this is a very old mentality for programming and design and development. Doesn't look like they're an agile team, meaning they can't release functionality in bits and pieces. They can't get us just a bit of something. They have to waterfall. They have to go from one function and one team or one team member to another until everything is built, and then you push it out the door. You can't iterate and build on a product. That is, you absolutely can do that. There are patches, and it is welcomed and expected in the year 2022.
I don't understand how a company which has been so innovative in the space of not really collectibles, but action figures, and has been so prone to iteration and being fresh, doesn't understand this is a different product than we are used to dealing with. We need to iterate differently. But they don't somehow, and it's mind-boggling to me.
It's just these old people, and with their old mindsets and their old ways, just letting this company exist in the year, 1994. This is the way everything has to be done because this is the way it was done then. No. That makes you a dinosaur and you go extinct. Hearthstone was built in Unity, I think. Arena is as well. So cool, we're on decent technology.
Yeah. You're not on JavaScript, so you've got something going there.
Why can't we have the same functionality that they have in that game?
Don't understand.
I did like the point about D&D because I didn't really branch out and think about other parts of the org. I think there is a little bit to speak of in regards to leaving that team alone, and I think it has more to do with forcing IP upon them than anything else.
Yeah.
Like, why'd you need to throw Ravnica and some other stuff at that team to build books for? We're probably going to get a new Capernia or whatever thing if I had to guess.
Here's a D&D crossover set because that worked out so great for Guilds of Ravnica.
It might have played well if people played it, but it's the cross branding. You own both IPs. You want to open people's eyes and say, hey, look, you could also be doing this too. But just let them do their fucking thing. Those guys have been doing it forever. Like, they crushed Pathfinder. That game doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And
you know what? Good job, because everyone when that came out assumed, this is way better than D&D. This is going to kill D&D, and you outlasted it.
Yeah, the Pioneer Red Box that came at a time where people were struggling with D&D 4th Ed because the rules were so heady and dense. They made things easier. It was weird. D&D 4th Ed felt like World of Warcraft arenas.
Garbage.
Well, no. It was this kind of everything felt like a real skirmish where you just everybody was in melee and you're all just punching each other. It's just bar fights all the time.
Yeah.
And the rules for grapple were incredibly difficult. But
it was dumb.
Yeah, and it's just It was a really good update to the rules that allowed other games to say, like, oh, we could just crib the 4th ed rules. They're clear enough now that where we don't have to rely on 3rd or 3.5. These are clear. Anybody can get them. And if you play a game like 4th ed, they'll just make sense. Pathfinder comes out. The red box is insane. They make the game so much easier, so much more fluid. And WotC, like, went dark for a little bit with D&D. They were doing their supplemental stuff and everything else, and then just blew the doors off with 5th ed.
Yep.
Like,
it was great.
Yeah, so on that side of things, I think they're doing great. I think you could just stand to leave them alone. Don't pester them to make your supplemental crap. Unless it is that downtime where they're not working on sets and they can dedicate the resources, but don't make them context switch. Don't ask them to do that. It's just not going to work out well. It's like asking your QA team to then start curating cubes or reading design files.
That's going to go over swimmingly.
Yeah, or read through design files. Context switching doesn't always work out. Split prio, split time. You can't dedicate.
Dumb.
Yeah. I know, and a lot of
picks.
Oh, good.
Oh, I was gonna say picks.
Oh yeah, we can do that. But you did mention, like, I brought up Masters packs at the end, and you had a good point about that.
Yeah.
I think
it doesn't cost extra to make them. Why are you charging us $15 in some cases for this? The cost of the cardboard, of the ink, whatever, is negligible, and it doesn't cost anything extra over what a normal set does. In fact, it's probably cheaper to design than a normal set because the cards are already made. These cards exist. You just have to have a cube curator look at them and say, whatever, this makes a cool limited format. Animate Dead and World Gorger? Let's do it. Great. That's all you need. It is so much more simple. It should not cost so much more. And you know what? You're making money hand over fist when these release. Great. You want your game to be affordable? Actually make it print to demand. Sell these sets, sell these packs for $5, $6. You want to charge a little bit extra? Fine. I don't see why they should be $10 to $15 when it doesn't cost anything extra. And if anything, is cheaper because you don't have to pay a design team to come up with cards from scratch. It doesn't make sense to me that we're going to charge all this extra because we can. Mm-hmm. Great. Just get more product out. Make the money that way. Keep your players happy. And then you don't have, you just reprinted this card and it's already $100 again. Look, you clearly care about the secondary market. Otherwise, Secret Lairs wouldn't exist. Why does that product exist if you don't care about the secondary market? Get rid of that. Just make better products all the time, which goes back to what I said last episode. Sorry.
They could probably just make a box of Force of Wills and Monocrypts.
Yeah.
Soul Rings, Lightning Greaves. That's it.
Yep. Sells.
Four cards in a pack. You'll sell everyone.
Every single one.
As long as you price it properly. Chase all you want, but there's no reason. Now I'm good for picks, though. You want to go first? Did I go first? Who went first?
You went first last week. I'll go first this week. So mine, in keeping with my ongoing trend of looking at market trends, is Smokestack. Specifically Urza's Saga, though looking at the price history of the From the Vault Annihilation version, same deal. Both are applicable. So Smokestack was one of those cards that was like reserve list-ish, that basically we're just never going to print this effect again. It doesn't play Magic the way we want to play Magic. It's awful. We don't like it. Great. Cool. However, it's really good in EDH stacks lists. In fact, it's where the term stacks comes from. So why now? Well, if you take a look at the stocks graph, you can see that it reached its all-time high earlier last year and about April, and we've been on a steady downtick ever since. We've seen some fluctuation recently, but it looks like we've arrived at a new floor for this card at around $15 to $20. Now, this is the kind of thing that I see as cyclical in nature, and it's a new cycle that we're seeing start to develop, where you have all these, like, second-tier reserve lists, the soft RL, as I've referred to it, that these are the effects we're not going to print again. Like Tangle Wire is another example, and I went for the From the Vault Tangle Wire not too long ago. These are the things that we're just not going to see come out of Wizards of the Coast because it's not conducive to game design. and it's not conducive to fun because Smokestack and Tangle Wire are both very much there is a finite amount to be had in a game of Magic, and I intend to have it all. Wizards doesn't like those cards. So now that we're at a new floor, what's our timeline like? Honestly, I'd say about 8 to 12 months. Between that and the fact that they're sitting at about $15 to $20, I wouldn't go super deep on this. I'm not packing like 30 or 40 of them. Realistically, I'm probably packing more like 10 to 20. Yep. Now, the interesting thing about this is that while this price surge, price fluctuation, whatever you want to call it, has been going on, the quantity's been diminishing, specifically on the From the Vault. So when I picked this as we were delaying this two-parter, it was on my pick list probably like a week and a half ago was when I said this is going to be my official pick. We've gone from 102 to 78 listings of the From the Vault in Near Mint or Lightly Played. And we've gone from 107 to 103 for Urza's Saga. What this means is this is actual just organic demand drying this up. This is the market at work. We are seeing the quantity equalize supply and demand. Our price is equalized with the desired quantity, which means that we're in a particularly stable point for buy-in right now. As far as buy lists, there's no international buy lists that are causing this card to surge like there is with Ragavan or some of the other MH2 cards. This is purely organic. This card is seeing play. People are picking this card up. They want it to have it to play. It's not a case of speculation going on here. It seems like it's natural forces at work. The interesting thing here is that Card Kingdom has not fluctuated on price. Their retail is still the same as it's been, about $20. That's good, because that means, again, by their indications, this is just a normal market trend. We're at a stable time right now to buy in. So I'd be looking at probably about 8 to 12 months to see when this cycle repeats itself. Granted, it started early in 21, but this seems like something that's going to take a little bit longer to hit again. We may see a little bit of a surge come tax season, as we are prone to do in a lot of cards, but I wouldn't expect it to be too much like it was earlier this year when all of a sudden we went from 6 to 30. That I expect to happen in spring of 2023, if not around holiday time, maybe.
Okay.
We'll see. EDH is who you're going to. This isn't seeing play in Legacy. It's not seeing play in Vintage. It's not even Modern Legal. This is going to be purely EDH, purely collectors, which is one of the reasons that I think the From the Vault is an interesting pickup, because while it's not exactly reserve list, hasn't been printed in foil except for the From the Vault one, which is honestly pretty gnarly art.
Yeah.
I'm just a sucker for the original, so that's why I picked that.
It's also an FTV, so it's going to be a nice Pringle for you.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Like a mid-era one.
Yeah. So that's my pick. Again, I wouldn't go super deep. I'd go like 10 to 20, and I think it's a good 8 to 12 month hold, because in this new wave of surges that we're seeing in prices, this is something that has playability, it has low reprintability, and it has a decent amount of liquidity based on the number of buy and sell posts I've been seeing on Facebook for this card recently. So it satisfies really all three of those that you want on a long-term spec. Because if this is the new floor, which by all indications it is, all right, we're out, whatever we're out, and that's all we're ever going to be out on it. It's hard to take a loss unless WotC design philosophy changes drastically and all of a sudden there's a Derevi Stacks Commander list. Yeah. Who knows?
Smokestack is interesting for a number of reasons. One, I think the reprint equity on this is really low because of the trick with stacks where you can sacrifice and then put your counters on as the owner of the card, which is a type of gameplay that WotC just no longer wants to promote. So putting this in any kind of playable set in the future is probably a non-starter. So something like a Masterpiece, or if we ever go back to that again, maybe. But before I discuss that, for me, Smokestack isn't just one card. You mentioned that this is the progenitor of the Stacks archetype. So there are a lot of companion cards to Smokestack. I think of Sphere Resistance, Thorn of Amethyst, Lodestone Golem, all these taxing effects that go into the Vintage Stacks deck. Basically, all the artifacts that aren't mox and have to be banned in Vintage, or restricted in Vintage.
Yeah.
Interestingly, Sphere Resistance not only got a masterpiece, but jumps around Oath of the Gatewatch release. There's a hard spike there. Thorn of Amethyst, also a jump at Oath of the Gatewatch release. These aren't seeing legacy play. I honestly cannot remember what was going on at the time in EDH that would really prompt this. Smokestacks didn't move. And now, like, sure, nobody, like you mentioned, nobody really plays smokestacks. The idea of stacks, espresso stacks, mud stacks, etc. is dead and gone in Vintage. You just play the taxing pieces. But it's not like Vintage is the driving force to take Sphere of Resistance, which was a perennial $8 card. Sorry, $3 card, up to, 15, cresting 20, and now over 30. This is going to be a reduction of quantity in the marketplace for either a more aggressive EDH style play or EDH play in general. And I think I like picking up the cards that kind of fall behind when you look at stuff like this. When you look at companion cards, like, well, if you're playing this, then this makes sense, and this makes sense, and this makes sense, right? Smokestacks is right there with that package, and this could be nostalgia speaking, but looking at the other two, seeing that they are still kind of dancing around an average floor, I like Smokestack as the better pick, because those two have just kind of roped, despite the fact that there is movement. They just keep, when you average it out, it just is flat, essentially. There hasn't been a lot of rise on this. Smokestack, there's still a lot of meat on the bone, and I think it's a good and fine pick overall. To your point, I don't think I'd go in super deep. It's not like it's a really demanding pick at 20-ish for either version. It's just, I think there's a little more of a liquidity issue. At
it's
20.
It is liquid, but it's not as liquid as like a fetch land at $20. And that's, there's a specific player that wants this card, whereas with a $20 fetch land, everybody wants that card. So while it's liquid, it's not as liquid as some other $20 investments, or as like a $1 pick, when we're slumlording it with Sarkhan's Unsealing, which one day
we'll get there. One day when quantity dries, we'll get there.
Yeah.
My pick, I am targeting EDH again. This time I'm going back to the well, and we're going to Court of Cunning, which pairs with I think the white court I picked a while ago. Court of Cunning is the mill court, for those that are wondering. The text is very small. When the courts, they're a cycle of cards. There's one in each color. When they ETB, you become the monarch, and the triggered effect changes whether or not you are the monarch, generally increasing in quantity. So if you're not the monarch, target player mills 2 cards. If you're the monarch, they mill 10 cards. This is from Commander Legends, paired with Bruvac. That's a lot of cards. Paired without Bruvac, still a lot of cards, right? So, seemingly narrow in scope on the surface, but this card plays well in both mill decks as, graveyard shenanigan decks. I'll put it in quotes because there's a lot that goes on to that. So, this looks like a Rockstar in either a mono blue mill or a Dimir mill, as it's a passive mill component that functions without any kind of restrictions. Whether you're the monarch or not, this card is always good, but being the monarch, obviously, better. Below the surface, there's a lot more to the card. You can play it in Reanimator-style decks that can quote-unquote clone from the graveyard with cards like Lazav Dimir Mastermind, decks that want to quote-unquote, again, spell sling from the graveyard, either yours or your opponent's, and then a whole lot more beyond that. I don't know how to bucket Grolnok and Slogurk style decks, but they're also in here as well, and those are brand new commanders. Both frogs, I think. No, sorry, one's a frog, one's an ooze. Right? They just blue doing graveyard things for some reason. As people look to play out of the graveyard as zombie support moves to graveyard-based synergies, not that mill is an evergreen. Now that mill is an evergreen and recycle keyword receiving support, as long as cards like Kess keep being printed, cards that can mill in large chunks without much effort will become better and better looks. So we look at some of the zombie stuff, and Isn't Gissa and Garofta play out? The Scarab God plays out of the graveyard. And then there's Cast Dissident Archmage, like I mentioned, which is just like an every turn Snapcaster Mage. And then there's also a smidge of Legacy support. Is it Delver? Essentially, Murktide lists play a court out of the sideboard here and there, so that puts a small amount of pressure on the card outside of EDH, but I don't expect Legacy demand to really push this up too high.
Yeah.
And this kind of like reinvigorates a lot of the mill cards. Not like Traumatize, which just doesn't quite mill. It just like you just grab half of your deck, put it in the graveyard. We're looking to just literally play as many cards with mill as possible in our themes. As far as the timeline is concerned, we know Commander Legends is well out of print, and there's been no solid price increase of the court. I'll bring Soxgraph up. Coming out of the recent Innistrad sets, so we're looking at most likely close to a year based on slow growth at the buy list level. So again, no price bump coming out of the Commander Legends print run end, and no bump from the recent Innistrad sets, which look to play out of the graveyard with 2 brand new commanders and a bunch of zombie support. So we're looking at a year. Right now, CK is buying double the quantity they were back in June 2021 for approximately 36% more, while there has been an approximate 10% reduction in unique prices on TCG Player and an approximate 18% increase in price. Now, these sound like big numbers, big percentages, but we're working with small numbers here. So I added this card to my list in June of 2021. CK was buying 40 at 33 cents. When I wrote this, they were buying 87 at 45 cents. This was before a weekend, and coming out of a weekend, then they're now buying 106 at 45 cents. So they're just churning this stock, but they think they might have found a price ceiling right now for sales, is what this is telling me, because supply is still active. We need to drain supply. The TCG market place had 367 LP or better at $1.19. We now have 325 at $1.41. So again, we can see this upward trajectory, but because we're working with small dots, we're working with cents, these large percentages aren't changing a whole heck of a lot. I think both of these numbers will continue to go up based on the utility of the card now and expectations of future releases, but the overall percentage price increase will probably stay the same, making this a slow growing spec, but one I'm happy to go 20 deep on. At $1 and change, I'll go in. As far as reprint equity is concerned, I don't think we're going to see these reprinted in the next Commander Legends sets. I believe we will see another cycle like these, as these kinds of sets will let the design team flex in interesting ways. If it were to come back, though, my expectation would be that we would see it in a dedicated mill EDH deck attached to a set. So, like Caperni or whatever, and I'd be very happy about that, actually, because if a mill EDH deck were released with a set, that means we would most likely see heavy mill support within the set, and the demand for cards like this from the EDH deck should outpace supply. It might not be the one to target, the deck to target, like I mentioned previously, if we were to see this in decks, but the mill keyword having a heavy presence in the set means it's going to trigger people to go back and look for cards that fit. And this is a very affordable card, and right now a fairly abundant card, and I think that would be great for this. I really do think demand would outpace supply if it does end up in one of those decks.
Yeah, I think this one's particularly good, one, because it's, it appeals to EDH. But two, it falls into that category of, well, yes, your timeline is probably accurate for buy list. It just takes one error at the dev level, and all of a sudden this can be a $15 to $20 card. One busted thing with the graveyard. Hogak happened, and suddenly Vengevine was good again. Hollow One existed because we printed a common that caused you to discard cards. Yep. It's the type of thing that filling in with graveyard shenanigans, to me, yes, I would go incredibly deep on this card, but I wouldn't put it in the box where I just forget about it and then check in a year. I would put it in the box where it's like, all right, I kind of have to pay attention to this, just because I want to make sure I've got this covered. That's what it falls into, and that's what I really like about this card. Is it's such a good, like, all right, I'm here, I'm doing the thing, this is going to be awesome. Like, it is one card away from going from $1 something to $10 and something, and just having the overnight 10x. And that, to me, is where the strength of this card lies. Because it is something that I think inevitably is just going to be like, natural progression. It's a card that draws you cards and mills, and that appeals to so many people. It also has the opportunity to just spike something because some stupid graveyard card gets printed.
Yeah.
So.
Or it's just some part of a constructed strategy. You mentioned, you can play it in the main. The Legacy deck just wants to go a little longer. You become the Monarch, you draw an extra card, and oh, by the way, you're milling 10 a turn. The ability to flex in turn from targeting yourself to somebody else and ending the game there is also fantastic. And who knows, if things slow down in Modern, this could absolutely become it can't become a thing because it's in Commander Legends, so we'll never see it there. Maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll see the court cycle movement in Modern. It's not like they're overpowering by any stretch. They all cost 4 or 5. We can get there. But this is kind of like the Bow of Nylea pick and the Biden of Thassa pick. It's like they keep making stuff that works with it, so we got to start looking for our inroads when we can.
Yep.
And because this is a card that is cheeky and on the surface looks like, oh hey, the top 2 generals on EDH rec account for 70, like some ridiculous percentage of decks with this card, like, but they're mill. Obviously, this is what it does, and then you actually read through it, and you're like, oh no, it doesn't. This fuels the graveyard for whatever you want to do. That's it. It's like 2 buckets, Groll, Knock, and Slowgurk withstanding. Mill, shenanigans, those 2. And that's one of the reasons why I really like the card, because it could also be surprising in what it does later. Because of a brand new card.
Its upside is like absurd, and its floor is still perfectly fine. And if it were legal in Modern, which obviously it's not, thankfully, I'm sure Blue Black Mill would be even better than it already is. So
something about not introducing the Monarch mechanic to Modern or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's also a powerful effect just tacked onto the card. That's the first sentence. When it enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. This only costs 3. This is the cheapest one. It's not 4. I'm sorry. It's 1 double blue. I thought it was 2 in double blue. I've been reading it wrong for like 2 weeks now. You become...
Still good.
Exactly. You become the Monarch. That's just super powerful on the surface. Like, if you want to become the Monarch in EDH, you want to play as many effects that do that as possible. For 3 mana, you get that, and you can mill somebody out. Cool. Why not?
Yeah.
But I think that's going to be it for the end of this week, and thus our 2-part episode on what we would do if we were in charge over at Hasbro. As always, we are at MtG Cabalcast on Twitter, on Facebook, Patreon, and YouTube. And if you want to reach us individually, I am Halt, I am Reptar on Twitter. You are
at Thirsty
Sizzler.
Sizzler.
See you next week.